You meditate, you journal, and you repeat daily affirmations. Yet the same patterns of self-sabotage and pain keep returning. It feels like an endless climb on a shifting staircase, effort that consumes energy without reaching a destination. The psyche frequently weaponizes these tools to stay safe. We use positive thinking and spiritual concepts as a high-vibe shield, a way to spiritualize our discomfort so we never have to face our deepest fears directly. Many of our practices offer temporary relief, a momentary shift in mood that fades by the afternoon. Permanent transformation requires a shift in our baseline identity, changing the emotional set point that pulls us back into the old self. Managing symptoms keeps the true source of suffering alive in the dark. Without reaching the root cause, our efforts only teach us to cope more gracefully with a pattern that is destined to repeat. Suffering operates as a physical, vertical architecture, a deep structure of trauma and memory built layer by layer within the psyche. Willpower fails because it only targets the top floor of this building. Surface-level behavioral changes leave the structural foundation of our pain completely intact and unexamined. Real transformation begins when we descend past these superficial layers. We must reach the foundational basement where the original fracture of the self occurred. At the very base of this architecture lives the exiled self. This is the vulnerable part of us that we abandoned years ago because of early trauma, shame, or a total lack of safety. To protect this wound, the nervous system constructs a false identity, an elaborate management system designed to ensure the exiled self is never exposed or hurt again. This protection manifests as perfectionism, people-pleasing, or emotional numbness. Brené Brown's work highlights how initial pain hardens into a shame-shaped armor that keeps us hidden, even from ourselves. The false identity views any attempt to heal as a threat to its own existence. As Eckhart Tolle explains, the egoic structure thrives on its history and its defenses. To drop them feels like a form of death. Our stuckness is not a sign of laziness. It is the result of a nervous system that remains fiercely loyal to its original survival strategies and terrified of the vulnerability required to change. Edward Mannix describes compassion as an active, penetrating, reconciling force. It functions as a precise spiritual tool that can bypass our rigid defenses to reach the core of our suffering. We typically respond to our wounded parts by trying to judge, manage, or transcend them. We treat our pain as a problem to be solved, rather than a part of us that needs to be met. Compassion bypasses the false identity entirely, making direct, non-judgmental contact with the core wound. When the exiled self feels it finally belongs, the nervous system receives the signal it's been waiting for, letting the old defensive architecture completely dissolve. True freedom arrives when we finally bring these abandoned, exiled parts of ourselves back into a state of belonging. These inner fractures eventually show up as external blocks. Gifted people who feel called to serve often hit an invisible ceiling when it comes to their money, to their purpose, and their public visibility. This upper limit problem triggers subconscious sabotage. We undercharge for our work or pull back from growth because expansion threatens the nervous system's old sense of safety. Marianne Williamson suggests that we are often terrified of our own radiance. This fear of visibility is the exiled self dreading the accountability and exposure of stepping into its own power. Meeting that inner exile with compassion causes these external blocks to dissolve. Visibility is no longer a threat to the self, but a natural extension of being whole. Healing that stays confined to private life risks becoming a form of self-absorption. As our inner divisions reconcile, we become more aware of our interdependence and the shared suffering in the world around us. This awareness leads to what Bell Hooks calls love with structure. When we stop abandoning ourselves, we develop the capacity to confront systems of domination and exclusion that abandon others. Public compassion requires the fierce courage demonstrated by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It demands justice and unflinching truth-telling, without using that justice as a proxy for unhealed hatred or revenge. By resolving our own inner architecture, we stop projecting our personal trauma onto public life. we can finally participate in messy, global conflicts with a steady presence that seeks to heal rather than dominate. The transformation of our world is inseparable from our internal work. It begins at the exact moment we stop abandoning the exiled parts of ourselves.